So this slide's a little bit busy, but I'll explain it and then we're going to jump in and show you how it works. So the BI reporting tool we have has quite a bit of a functionality that I think a lot of people don't take advantage of, likely just because they don't know how it works and how to set it up. So I'm going to give you an example of that. This example is we're using the %of function on a BI report that is in a crosstab view. So here I've got a report that we'll dig into in a minute, and I've added a calculated field that says the %of category. And what that does is we have a count of observations that were performed on this attribute, human performance. The count is 40. Well, we'll use the one in red, sorry. So the questioning attitude, the count is 30. So a lot of times you're going to want to know, well, what percentage of that is the overall total, as well as the group that it's within. This group is the human performance grouping, the category. So 30 is 14.49% of the 207 total for that group of human performance. This report has another function on there that's grouped a little differently. This one, as I'll show you in a second, is a row group. This last one, % of total, is a row total. So this 30 is 6.29% of the overall report total, which is not visible on this screenshot, of 477. So it may seem a little overwhelming at first to set this up, but it's actually quite easy, and that's what we'll jump into now and show you. So I think you'll find it useful. So I'm going to switch from this to my desktop. And here we're in a demo area that we'll be able to show you all this information. So here's a snapshot of that report we've created. So as you'll see here, if we scroll down, we'll get to the very bottom. There's been some additional observations added since I made that slideshow yesterday. But we have this field showing % of category that gives us the % for each row, what percentage that is of its category total, as well as the total for the whole report, which is the 511 attribute rows. So to build that, it's actually quite simple. Once you drag in a couple of fields, well, the first thing you want to do is make sure you're in crosstab mode when you're creating a report. That's like a pivot table in Excel. And all I've done is I've dragged the category and the attribute fields. Those lay out here, and then added the count field. So prior to adding any of these columns, here's what it would look like. So I've got the attributes rolled up by category and a count of the number of observations that have taken place with that attribute in that time period. So what we're going to do is show you how to create that % of category. So anybody can just click on this little icon here, say create calculated measure, and we're going to use this function called %of. So instead of making it right here, I'm just going to edit the existing one though. So here's what it looks like. I had selected the % of category. It gives you some instructions here on what to populate. And all I had to do is add in the field, which we're doing a % of, which is the count field. And then you select one of the levels that it will roll up to. And for this one, I've used row group. And it gets a little confusing, that's why I want to explain how this works. So now if we drag in this field, so here's the % of that we just defined. So 18 is 18.95% of 95. So as I depicted on this slide, that row group is basically this section here. Employee hygiene is one grouping, food storage is another grouping, and then that just calculates per row its percentage of the row group total. Likewise, I added a second function, but here instead of row group, I've used row total. So that every row that is listed, it'll give its percentage of what it is of the overall report total. So that's a pretty easy way to add additional analysis fields to your report. It's not even necessary to have the count in there. If you'd rather just view the percentages, you can eliminate the count, and then it'll just show the percentages. Also, if you would rather not have the decimals, you can right-click on a field and get rid of the decimals as well. So one last thing I wanted to show you is, as I noted here, I've been using the row group. So if we go back to this help on this percent of, you'll see that other options are column group and column total. So I have another example where I utilize that function. So here you see we have attributes listed across the left and ratings across the top. So the ratings are no and yes. And here we have the count and the percent of. So here, this calculated field, as I mentioned, uses column group instead of row group. So these columns are going across the top. Now initially I only have one field that's in this column, so the percent is actually the total. So 1 no for all food items are correctly labeled is 20% of 5. 4 yeses is 80% of 5. But since I've defined this as a column group, I can add additional information into there and group it by that. So let's say we want to analyze it by dates created as well. So we're going to add in created on. We're going to add that to the top columns though. And initially it adds them for every day, which we don't want. So here's another trick that you guys can use when you're in a crosstab view and you're viewing a date field. If you right click it, you can change the grouping and summarize that data to various levels. So here we'll do it by month. So now we have each month that some of these observations were completed. And if we open one up, within that grouping of October, we'll see the no's and the yeses. And here we can see that this 1 no is 25% of the 4 for the month of October. 3 is 75% for the month of October. So that's how it works for a column grouping versus a row grouping, is it just is across the columns instead of across the rows. But again, just to highlight one last time, we'll look here on this slideshow. You just need to use the percent of function, type in the field, which is going to be the count field, and then define the level. And I think you'll find that useful to be able to analyze your data. Of course, you can always export any of that to Excel as well and manipulate it if you need to any further inside Excel.